An open flame attached to the tip of a tail should literally cook it alive. Fire needs three things to exist: fuel, oxygen, and heat. A lot of heat. That's why you never see a puddle of petrol lighting up the road, even in the sweltering heat of summer. Charmander has a flame attached to its tail that has enough energy to burn continuously. So, what if Charmander were real? Would it burn itself to extinction? Charmander's tail fire is like a candle flame. A small candle releases about the same amount of heat as you are watching this very video. If you just relaxed all day watching videos, you need to eat about 3 Big Macs worth of calories to survive. Notice that this metabolic heat is spread across the entire surface of your skin, which has the same surface area as 2 yoga mats side by side. Charmander has all that heat concentrated at the very tip of its tail. Well, Charmander would also be able to survive on just 3 Big Macs. This is because the energy output hasn't changed. The thing that is different is that Charmander is releasing the same heat as your entire body, concentrated into something the size of a pea. Since it is a reptilian Pokemon, we can assume its body gets its heat from the fire itself. So, as long as Charmander gets enough fuel in its body, it can sustain a fire. How about the second ingredient though, oxygen? Well, just like any animal with a mouth and nose, Charmander can take in a lot of oxygen from the air per second. The speed at which oxygen is absorbed by cells depends on a lot of factors, including things like concentration gradient, the breathing rate, and surface area. Roughly a 0.6 meter tall Charmander will need to absorb as much oxygen, about 0.005 grams, as an adult human every second to react completely with the fuel for producing its flame. We'll assume Charmander can produce enough internal energy to kickstart the combustion reaction through body heat. After that, the tail could absorb oxygen directly from the air to sustain the reaction. So far, Charmander is surviving. It can afford the calories. It can access the oxygen. We'll even grant it enough internal heat to ignite combustion. So, does that mean a living flame is actually possible? If the flame on its tail goes out, Charmander dies. Flames die when they lose or dissipate heat faster than they generate it. Water strips heat away extremely quickly. Air does it slowly. Living tissue, which is mostly made of water, is therefore very good at absorbing heat. Your body survives because blood vessels and skin are optimized for transferring heat to their surroundings. The larger the surface area, the faster the heat can get away. If heat is trapped, temperature rises. The flame at the tip of Charmander's tail sits only centimeters from muscle and blood, and that flame could exceed 1000 degrees Celsius. The reason you can briefly wave your hands through a candle flame without injury is not because 1000 degrees is safe, but rather because the total energy transferred in that fraction of a second is exceedingly small. Heat flow, not temperature alone, is what burns you. Charmander isn't waving its tail across a flame. Its tail is making the flame. The heat energy transmitted to a given area of an object per second is known as the heat flux. Due to the pea-sized surface area of Charmander's tail and the fact that the flame surrounds the tip, the heat flux can be enough to cause third-degree burns within a few seconds in humans. All this from a weak candle flame. Now, reptilian skin is quite different than human skin, but if we assume they aren't substantially different, then it's no wonder the best Charmander can do is cough up unimpressive crimson embers. The fire would burn straight through Charmander's skin and get to its other organs all within a minute of being born. If all of that energy were dumped directly into his tail, Charmander would stand no chance. Of course, not all of the heat energy from the flame would go into his tail. Most of it will be dissipated in the surroundings due to convection. Still, does Charmander have enough tricks up its sleeve to remove the heat from its tail every second before it turns into a crispy snack? Real reptiles, such as lizards, bask in the sun to absorb heat energy and raise their heart rate to become productive. The heat flux on Charmander's tail would be almost 100 times greater than what lizards normally tolerate. This leads to protein denaturation, blood coagulation, and tissue destruction that would begin to spread throughout the body. Since this flux does not stop until the Charmander dies, the tail must have an extreme level of thermal insulation to prevent practically instant death. This could be evolutionarily expensive, since it would probably require specialized proteins, tissues, and even whole systems just to survive. There is an alternative solution. Suppose it has some kind of spongy skin on its tail, which effectively served as the ultimate natural insulator. There is an equation for calculating the thickness of such insulation required to reduce the heat flux to safe levels. Using this, we would be able to calculate just a few millimeters of insulation would be enough to keep the flame alive and even eventually strong enough to melt glaciers. Humans have invented aerogel, which is a material with an unbelievably high porosity, being made of 99% air with nanoscale pore sizes that suppress convection, enabling it to be about twice as good as insulating than air. There is no reason for nature to engineer something like this normally. But Charmander is not normal, so nature rises to the challenge. As Charmander evolved to have a fire on its tail, the tail also evolved better and better insulation to protect itself. The disadvantage is that the insulation would probably be very brittle if it were aerogel and would be extremely metabolically expensive to continuously replace. So, Charmander would have to eat much more than just 3 Big Macs worth of food in a day. Fuel? Check. Oxygen? Check. As for the last element, Charmander doesn't defy physics, rather, it simply turns the heat up on biology. Apparently, Pokemon don't just turn the heat up on biology, but even on our taste buds.